Bethesda just announced the next big thing coming to Fallout 76, and specifically a bunch of added benefits for subscribers of Fallout First, but also some benefits for the game overall, and I think really one of the big pieces of its future, and that is Fallout Worlds, which is functionally adding in customizable servers into the game. So you can create and set up a server and in the process change up a ton of game rules to curate a really unique and interesting experience and potentially experience this with others. So in this video, I want to break down what this is actually doing. In addition to these private servers, there's actually a few other features and even some unrelated updates to the world and game overall, and really give my feedback and thoughts on this. It's still pretty early out. This is not expected to come until September, and since we're in the middle of July, they have plenty of time to iterate and improve on this. So let's first look at what exactly is getting added here, as it is pretty interesting. If you now go to play a game in Fallout 76, you'll notice that there are two additional options and one removed option in the world selection screen. Nuclear Winter will be getting removed with this update, so you still have about a month and a half to 2 months to actually experience that. And in its place, you will have custom worlds and public worlds. Custom worlds are the thing we kind of knew was coming with this, what we suspected. These are going to only be available to Fallout First subscribers, so in effect, this update is actually a really large expansion on what you can do with a Fallout First subscription. As of right now, there's no price increases or anything like that, so this is quite a bit of added functionality for the same price. If you could already justify it, this is definitely a pretty nice cherry on top. And these custom worlds will give you a ton of settings to mess with. You can mess with building, where you could build, how much you can build, if it even costs anything to build, how much damage you're receiving or dealing, some of the various weather types, or even these color filters that can be applied to the world, and a bunch more. One of the other big aspects is definitely the kind of cheat mode you can enable. You can do a lot of stuff to give yourself a lot of cheats on your character, or kind of not have to worry about resource depletion anymore. But that's actually only one of the new features coming with this, as there is a totally second one that was kind of a surprise, and that is public worlds. That's technically the name. I'll probably call it something like public custom world throughout this video, but in effect, this is a curated custom world by Bethesda that anyone can join. So basically, it's a 24-person server that does have some custom world settings applied to it. Like on this particular one, Bethesda made it so the building rules are relaxed, as well as you can build more in general. This will just be a server up for about a month where anyone can join it. And Bethesda describes how they will, on a monthly basis, actually rotate this. So on a monthly basis, there will be a game mode you can play that will have slightly edited game rules. And some of these can be pretty extreme, like allowing full open PvP. They describe a few examples, and one of them is pretty interesting. High risk, which is described as no fast travel, always on PvP. Players will drop additional loot on death. Right now in the PTS, it's just in the Happy Builder preset, which allows you to place your camp closer to existing locations, so you could actually place it on top of other locations to an extent. PvP is disabled, as well as the building restrictions are less, so it's relatively tame on this first one, but it definitely seems like an interesting and promising concept that we'll return to later on in this video. And outside of custom worlds and public worlds being available to just Fallout First members versus to anyone who plays the game, there's also one other big difference, as public worlds have a cap of 24 players like typical servers, while these custom worlds still only have a limit of 8 players like the traditional private servers. So if you create this awesome PvP based game mode, you could only have 7 other people outside of you join your game. And actually, a few disclaimers right now on the public test server, this is not actually working. Joining other people wasn't functioning, as well as the friends list was down for a while, so I can't actually test this out and report back to you. But let's actually go into some of the things you can customize and why I still think this can be a pretty cool feature, but some people are a little bit frustrated with it. Start with that, the customization options are kind of what you would expect, and perhaps even a little bit more. One of the first things I wanted to mess around with was full-on high damage dealt and received. This is one of the ways I love playing Fallout 4, and playing Fallout 76 with it is definitely pretty interesting. There's a few different settings here, so you could customize how much damage enemies are dealing to you, and also separately how much damage you deal to them. And you can set it to this nuclear level, which is meant to be insane, and multiply it by 900%. So functionally, I was one-shotting or killing enemies in a couple of shots, and the vast majority of the time they would also one-shot me, which makes an entire playthrough really interesting. I definitely want to try Fallout 76 like this, or even with a tweaked version of this. There's definitely a lot of settings to make the game more hardcore in this sense. You can make it so you drop more items on death, so you'll basically drop everything outside of your weapons and armor and apparel. So all of that ammo will be gone, which actually can be pretty difficult. If you're a melee build though, this isn't a super big deal. You can do things like turning off fast traveling completely. You could actually make it so all locations are discovered and fast travel is free alternatively. You can definitely cheat this and make the game way easier. There's actually a flat game mode slider that you can make the game easy, but also you can make it so you deal more damage and enemies deal less damage to you, and also do things like set yourself to have unlimited ammo, or even if you want to be ridiculously OP, make it so you have unlimited ammo without reloading. You can make it so VATS is extremely cheap to use, or even have no cost at all. With a lot of these sliders, they would have it on either like a 0 cost, a very low cost, a low cost, a normal cost, a high cost, or a very high cost. So you can really tweak and customize a lot of these various features to a fairly large degree, depending on which type of experience you really want. I'm not a big builder in Fallout 76, but the potential with that feature is pretty massive with these new custom servers. Right at the bat, you could make it so they're relaxed building rules, so you could just kind of build more things on top of each other, but even further, relaxed camp place settings. So you're able to place down your camp and literally build inside or on top of existing locations in the game. Typically, you can't do this. You can make it so your build budget is bigger. You can make it so building doesn't actually cost any resources at all. You can make it so the zone you could build in is both wider as well as way taller. And this gets really tall. I actually built a tower up to the top of this limit, and it's probably taller than anyone would ever need unless you're making some kind of flying craft. Then perhaps you'd want it a bit taller. I'm not a big builder, but there's definitely a lot of potential with this, in particular with building within other areas. I'm excited to see what the camp building community can do. Going into a full-on cheat mode could also be pretty fun, just making yourself completely invulnerable with unlimited ammo, with unlimited VATS, and all the other bells and whistles turned on. There's a ton of little things you could tweak with this, but I think that tweaking nature is one of the really cool aspects of this, in that almost every setting on this actually does have a lot of different modes. It's not just on or off, but there's a lot of little ticks in between. So for basically all of these, you could kind of tune it to how you want. For the damage aspect, for how much damage you'd receive and deal, I would like just a flat slider. Right now there's only a few options. I think a slider would be better if possible. There are also a variety of kind of interesting settings. You can make it so legendary mods, so legendary effects on weapons, armor, power armor, are just completely disabled. They will stop appearing in your world. You can make it so enemies will spawn around you, so you'll just permanently have enemies spawning around you. Of course, you can make it so PvP is always on and full open, or you could disable PvP. You could change things like the world overall, what kind of weather is in the background. You could always make it clear, or have some interesting and new weather types, and also just kind of a flat filter on the world overall. I don't really know why someone would use this. I definitely don't see myself using this filter option all too often. And if you played other games like Battlefield with those custom servers, it's pretty similar to that. And although all of this is particularly interesting, there are definitely some restrictions on this that will prove to be at least somewhat of a barrier to entry. So one of the big things that people are speculating about was a pretty cool PvP based mode. Turn off legendaries, add in PvP being always on and no fast travel, and you can have some pretty cool manually set up bases somewhere and create little fights around them. Well, private servers, or these custom private servers, are limited to 8 players maximum. You can still have a pretty cool 4v4, but it is definitely on the smaller scale. It's definitely not a nuclear winter replacement, at least right now. And Bethesda has said there's no plans to raise that 8-player limit. Even further, there's kind of a weird interaction with how characters are handled. When you launch a public or a custom world, you're actually having a copy of your original character made. It's that character you always play in adventure mode. Basically, when I launch my custom world, a copy is made and progress is kind of separated. Progress you make on a custom world will not transfer over to adventure mode, and the same goes for public worlds. Although all of these are separate, like there's one character for an adventure mode, there's one character for the public world that anyone can access, and then there's another separate character for your custom world. So even though Bethesda does have those public custom servers, progress from that will not carry over to your own private custom servers. Even further, there's 5 different presets of custom worlds you can set up, and even in between those presets, character progress will not carry over. Now hopefully this changes, because it just seems silly. You can actually edit your own existing world preset and the character progress will continue. It's not going to delete your character. But let's say I create a PvP based preset and then I create a different build peaceful based preset. If I try and use the same character on both of those, it'll not work. I'll have to create a new one for each of those. And at any point you can re-import your character from adventure, so it'll kind of make another copy of your character from adventure, and this will erase any progress you had on the custom world and just replace it with your adventure mode progress. And I think one of the biggest aspects of these handicaps is the 8-player limit, but also how progress is separated. So if you want to do the scoreboard, if you want to play with a bunch of your friends on a public server, anything you do on a custom server won't really count towards that. I've seen a lot of people saying, well, okay, then what's the point of a custom server? And I don't know if that's just them missing the point of this game or they're so used to grinding, but it's for fun. Like, these custom servers are largely to have a distinctive or potentially more fun way to experience this game. And I know for me at least, this is probably something I am going to be permanently using in the background of my videos. A lot of times when I'm filming, there are just a bunch of restrictions, and I don't necessarily want to play the game in a traditional way when I'm just getting background footage. Having some of these more cheaty modes or not dying as often would be super helpful to me. And even further, I just think it's more fun to play with enemies dealing more damage to me and me dealing more damage to them to get rid of that bullet sponge effect you traditionally see. I'll probably still jump back and forth between public and custom, and you can do that and still keep both characters. It's not like the second you play on a public world, it'll delete your custom world character. But overall, I think it's an interesting one. I think this is one of those features that really has a lot of potential, but it's going to depend on the community around it. It's going to depend on what the players actually do. As I mentioned before, right now there's a problem with joining other players, so you can't really test what other players will do. But as far as roleplay goes, this opens up a ton of doors. As far as PvP goes, this also opens up a ton of doors. I definitely would love to participate in some PvP events around this, or even kind of like a base wars, which could be set up here. But at the same time, I definitely understand why people have some reservations here. This is not going to be a feature for everyone, and some people that enjoy the grind or play the game for other reasons are still largely going to stick to public worlds and perhaps just use these custom ones for things like limit testing from time to time or exploring new features. Some things I kind of wish were here, like where the ability to automate nukes or perhaps even just give yourself resources. Like if I wanted to roll a ton of legendary items, it'd be cool if I could do something to give myself a bunch of legendary cores, or even, remove the daily limits altogether from the game. That'd be a pretty cool feature of custom worlds. Although I also think the public custom worlds have the potential to be pretty cool. On a monthly basis, Bethesda basically having the server with 24 players on it, as those do have the 24 player limit, not the 8 player limit, could be kind of cool. Like if they throw up a PvP server with something like no legendaries allowed, that was a huge suggestion when survival mode was still a thing, I would definitely try that out and probably mess around with it for the month it is available, because it only really has like 2 custom settings turned on. I feel like they should turn it up and try and make it an extremely different experience from vanilla. So overall with this one, I think it's one of those features that's probably just not going to be for everyone, but is pretty exciting for those select groups out there that will be actively using it. For some people, they might play it once and never touch it, just stick to their traditional Fallout 1st subscription using their private world from time to time because of that non-progress carryover. But for somebody like me, I am definitely making a dedicated custom world character and probably going to play through the entire game on that and then just continue to use that in the background of my videos because it is such a treat to actually have the ability to customize things for videos. Like even sometimes it's just raining and I wish it wasn't. It's so small, but that's such a nice thing to actually have control over finally. Not to mention all of the possibilities again with PvP, roleplay, and even kind of community organized mini games or something. Now obviously in the future there's definitely more I would love to see with this, some additions as far as the level of customizability. More customizable features is only a good thing, and also of course this is the framework that will eventually be used for mods, or at least that's what it seems like. It's basically all but confirmed, and I really do hope mods come sooner rather than later, like mod release before Starfield, or perhaps even just E3 2022. I would love to see mods before the Starfield hype really takes off. So although that's definitely the biggest new thing, Fallout Worlds being the big new update, there's actually also more. Daily Ops is going to have a pretty interesting and unique change that some will love and some will hate. So there's going to be a new weekend event with Daily Ops where basically enemies will have double mutations. So typically they only have one mutation, then the game mode mutation. This time they'll have 2 blanket mutations and also a game mode mutation. So like for right now on the public test server, you have enemies that sprint towards you but also explode on death. They are quite literally walking bombs running at you at a high rate of speed. But since the game mode is of course harder, as a result of this, you'll get better rewards. You'll get 2 to 6 legendary cores. Traditionally you only get 1 to 3. You'll get double experience as well as double the currency reward. Honestly, the rewards are a little bit iffy. I don't know if that's the best. I feel like they could definitely up those numbers considering how difficult some of these combinations will be, like any combination with Resilient. But I personally think this is really fun. Daily Ops are just way too easy. Some people like it that way. I think having an occasional challenge like every other weekend, and you could just ignore it if you don't want to play it, is pretty fun. And I don't imagine it's going to get too stale considering they will always be changing up. And even further, there's some new additions to Daily Ops. Communists will be a potential enemy type. Arcos Pharma, Watoga High School, as well as the Uncanny Cavern taverns will be potential dungeon types for this, so locations daily ops could appear in, as well as there's a bunch of new rewards added. All of these being rare rewards. I'm not going to go into each one individually, but a couple of them are pretty cool. But even further, something I absolutely hate is, at least right now on the public test server, basically all of the nuclear winter rewards are getting distributed to other outlets. So all of those cool, unique things you could only get from nuclear winter will now be earnable via treasure hunters, encrypted, Project Paradise, a colossal problem, and Minerva. These will not be tradable, but it seems really crappy. Like if you actually grinded nuclear winter to level 100 to get the Hellfire power armor, but then now you'll just be able to buy the Hellfire power armor with gold bullion, as well as some of those cool masks that you could get from nuclear winter. It just seems like a crappy thing to do. There's a full page up on this on the wiki with all the various methods. I really hope Bethesda changes this. It's okay to have legacy rewards. Some players won't be able to get certain things, and that's okay. It's kind of a cool badge of honor if you actually did the grind earlier on in the game's life. Even further, the glitched weapons from nuclear winter that were popping up in adventure mode now don't actually have ridiculously OP stats. Vault 51 is going to be a fully explorable interior. I actually don't want to spoil too much about this, but it is awesome. This is probably one of the coolest vaults in the game, funny enough. It has some additional lore, a lot of environmental storytelling, and some cool things to find within. Whoever designed this one actually did a really good job with it. It's a blast to explore. So again, I don't want to spoil too much with this gameplay. And lastly, there are a couple of interesting data mines from this update overall. Nothing huge, but we have a cursed broadsider as well as a cursed sickle coming to the game. There's going to be a new robot dog collectron that's going to get added at some point. Definitely pretty cool. There's a new scoreboard, of course, for season 6, which actually does have a pretty awesome design. I still don't ever participate in these because I find the grind repetitive and boring for a couple of skins, but hey, to each their own. And lastly, what is definitely going to make Bethesda a lot of money, they're adding a water slide to the game. So yeah, that's a look at the big update coming to Fallout 76, the big overhaul of the feature set available to Fallout First members and Fallout worlds in general. I'm excited for this one. On the public test server, it's okay, but I think where this becomes something super special is when the community fully gets their hands on these. Obviously, there's some restrictions that are pretty frustrating right now, but there is still a lot of potential for a lot of fun. And with that said, I thank you all again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.